Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today I'm doing a quick little review of a Netflix little TV series called Kong, King of the Apes. Now, this is a bit different than the normal stuff I do because this is a kids show. So, it's CGI animated kids show based on Kong. So, I kind of, because I had Netflix just from wanting to see, what was it called? The Godzilla anime series that's been on there recently. So, just after watching Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, I obviously watch more stuff on Netflix than just that. Last year when, was it last year or the beginning of this year? Whenever, whenever Godzilla Planet of the Monsters was that, I ended up watching a lot of Stranger Things and stuff like that and finding some really good shows on there. This time I was watching, what was it called? That new show, Lost in Space. I watched that. That one was pretty good. And I also have been watching Kong, um, King of the Apes. I went into this not expecting much at all because I'd seen some other really weird kid shows on Netflix and I've been like, okay, I'm not gonna be watching this. It was some stuff was just way too silly, and not to say that this one isn't, but I was quite surprised with it actually, especially the first episode because I yeah, I went into watching this expecting it to be like a 10-20 minute episode of just like silly, weird Kong battling some stuff or whatnot and just some kids show stuff. But the first episode turned out to be like over an hour long. It was like a movie basically, and it just kept escalating. So basically, what happens? I'm not gonna go through what happens in the whole series, but just give you kind of like a brief description of what it's about. Um, so for that, I'll have to go through the first episode, kind of. And basically, what it is that there's a scientist guy and like these two little kids who are twins. They're out camping somewhere one day, and out of nowhere, this is, by the way, this is set in the future, so like wild animals are very rare and like all on the verge of extinction basically, and they have some like future technologies and stuff like that. And they're out in the forest talking about like environmental stuff, like, oh, the environment's very important, blah blah blah. And very quickly we learn that one of the one of the kids is all like, I love the environment, blah 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 blah, and the other one's like, eat dirty mud, yeah, sort of like a little whiny bitch. And they don't really change because later in the series, quite quickly, they end up being adults. But so what happens is basically some random poachers are being paid like $10 million or something to capture a baby gorilla, and so our Kong for this series is a baby gorilla who just somehow manages to escape from these poachers. Their weird helicopter thing crashes in the forest, and the kid. The little kid, the nature-loving one, not the whiny one, ends up finding him, and he convinces his dad to let him keep Kong, because apparently if they bring him to the authorities, they're gonna do tests on him, or he's gonna live in a cage or something like that. And yeah, they name him Kong, and for no explained reason until the end of the series, he ends up growing huge. So they take him, they live on a houseboat of all things. But this is only just in the first first part of the first episode, because this first episode is like a movie. So then we get a montage of Kong growing up, and the other brother's like, ew, horrible ape, and and basically what happens is he grows too big and breaks the houseboat, and then they end up moving into a big house in the middle of the redwoods somewhere near San Francisco, I believe. You know, that it's actually reminded me quite a bit of what was it called? Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, or one of those newer Planet of the Apes movies where they actually the apes end up living in like the giant redwood forests just across the you know, the big San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, which ironically is red and not golden. So what's wrong with you, San Francisco? Anyway, so they end up living there, and the scientist guy, he's like does engine like bionics, so they call it. So like by like fusing electronics and life together and stuff like that. And so he's working on some stuff, but he's also very environmentalist and wants to conserve animals and that sort of stuff. But the little kid is like, I want to build robot dinosaurs, and so he just whines about everything for no reason. It's actually kind of funny. I'll bring it up later with him, but so because his dad won't let him use the lasers to um, oh, by the way, Kong was like once he grew too big and broke the boat, like the rest of society found out about him and they chased him away, and that's why they moved out. So there's a big escape scene. And they also have some random Hispanic lady that cooks for them, living there, and a annoying parrot. But luckily the parrot's not in it much at all, just in a few scenes every couple of episodes. Um, but yeah, I don't know what's the deal with her. She's either like the old their fathers, the scientists, like either their cook, nanny, slave, or I don't know, or like stepmom or something. They don't explain it at all. She's just lives with them, then moves to the forest with them as well, and just brings out like cookies and stuff every once in a while and feeds Kong and stuff like that. By the way, Kong is like, you know, proper King Kong size by now, I think. And and so what ends up happening is there's an incident in the laboratory where the whiny kid wants to use lasers, but his dad's out, and his dad didn't let him, so now he's trying to use them to build a better dinosaur. And and then he blames Kong for what happens because it ends up blowing up the uh, blowing up the laboratory and almost killing himself. But then Kong saves him, but then he blames Kong for it, and then because he got injured, he has like a bionic eye now, and then so he ends up moving away to live with his mom. She's never shown in the series, by the way, because then it cuts to the future where eventually the scientist guy and like Kong is revealed, and they end up like the scientist guy ends up building like a wildlife sanctuary plus slash laboratory area where it's kind of like a public theme park zoo place on what's it called, uh, the Rock, or whatever the big prison island, Alcatraz, that's the one in San Francisco is called. So they changed that, converted it to Kong Island, or some sort of longer title like the something conservation research facility, but everyone calls it Kong Island. And so basically, from that point, the so they're all grown up now, so it like cuts 10 years forward. So first it like does a montage of them growing up from when finding Kong, then it cuts again forward. And so I was just watching this movie, it's getting really long, and they keep cutting forward like months, years, this, and I'm just like, what's going on? I thought this was going to be like a silly kids show, just like Dora the Explorer or something random, but with a giant ape in it instead. But it just goes into all this stuff, and basically, the series pans out that now the brothers are grown up. There's also a couple of kids sidekicks have joined up, and the whiny brother is now the evil supervillain brother, but who has a robotic woman servant that works with him called Botilla. She's actually one of my favorite characters in this because you know, she just has this funny sort of sarcastic way about her, and throughout the series it's kind of funny because he sort of is very abusive to her, and she sort of uh, starts to go against him until the second series where she full on uh, just becomes the main villain until well, I'm not going to spoil it too much. I'm just going to go over some loose plot points of what it's about. But basically, she's one of my favorite characters, and in the first series, I think I really liked Kong. Obviously, it was a bit silly. The episodes did get shorter as the series progressed, so they did get to about half an hour, 30 minutes. And basically, so the evil brother always has like these robot dinosaurs. And the interesting bit about the first series was that the brother, he has his robot dinosaurs, and he eventually somehow makes it that he's trying to do like world domination and always trying to kill Kong. Again, no explanation why he hates Kong or he hates his brother or he hates wildlife. He just does. I think they even bring it up a couple of times with like, what's wrong with him? And or like when they're like, okay, we think that he's, or they're like, we think that he's got a screw loose now or something. But yeah, he's definitely got some mental issue because it's just almost funny. There's no explanation for it. He's just evil. Um, I mean, a lot of cartoon villains are, but this was just like so persistently evil for no reason whatsoever, even though they keep saving him and trying to be nice and giving him chances, and it's just weird. But so the first series is like the the evil guy convinces the world that because he frames the Kong and the other people for being, you know, like terrorists basically. So the world thinks that the evil scientist is like the good guy protecting them, but they're fugitives, so they're like living in a hideout in the redwoods now. And that's basically the progression of the series. Like he has like an evil plan, and then they like have to stop him, but they have to be undercover, and they have all these gadgets, and like Kong gets, you know, jetpacks and like um, things that block lasers, and then like invisibility abilities and stuff like that, and all that sort of stuff. So it was pretty enjoyable, and I really liked Kong in the first series because in the second series they changed the animation and the plot structure was quite different. Um, like they changed it to technically better animation, but it was kind of smoothed over, and everyone was made to look more nice and less sort of cartoony, I guess. I mean, obviously they were very cartoony all the time, but I don't know. If you watch it, you know what I mean. And like the hair texture changed and the lighting and stuff like that. But what I liked about Kong in the first series and what kind of kept me making me want to watch the series was when he was actually fighting. And what I liked about the fight scenes was, so I'm jumping all over the place, but what I liked about the fight scenes was that because they were robot dinosaurs for this like very G-rated uh, animated cartoon, they actually could like be pretty brutal in the first series at least, where the Kong could really smash them up. Even like in the opening title sequences, when I watched the first episode, I didn't know they were robot dinosaurs. Um, I mean, they did have like metallic parts on them, but they also had like flesh, like normal scales on them as well. So I thought like when he was like tearing their heads off and breaking them and doing all this weird stuff, I'm like, whoa, I like this. This is gonna be cool if this is what the show's gonna be like. But it turns out, okay, they're robots, so they copped out a little bit there, but it was cool. And like I said, in the second series, it didn't really have that. But the main reason was that I liked Kong in the first season, I mean, not series, was that he had his expression, like when he was like, you know, he had his fighting face on and he's roaring, looked just like the original, is it 1933? You know, the original Kong, where that one had a really goofy looking face, but he had like the big long fangs and just like that classic expression in the pose. And this one, in some moments, really kind of reminded me of that. And that's why I was really disappointed, where even though the production value went up in the second season, the kind of character of Kong in particular in his design went down. They kind of gave him those shorter, rounded teeth and made him look less goofy, but sort of less cool as well, I'd say. A little more generic looking. So I missed that, and that's a bit of a shame. And but it was still, the second season was still very enjoyable and not about on par to the first one with the writing and whatever. I mean, I wouldn't say this was a particularly special animated series, but since I'm into my kaiju stuff, and there's a lot of dinosaurs and giant gorillas battling in this, and I'm a big King Kong fan, so I figured it was worth doing a little review on this thing. I mean, it's so I'd say it's a little above average of what you'd expect from something like this. I found it to be quite addictive and very watchable, especially since it was on Netflix. So the streaming quality is very good and it loads very quickly. And again, I'd watch this series. Like, it does have a lot of sort of hammy environmental messages. Not as bad as you'd expect, actually. But there were a lot of little references to King Kong in there, like with the particular, like he does the Empire State Building pose on stuff a couple of times. He fights like T-Rexes and some little bits here and there. Like I even thought he was going to fight a snake at one point because they introduced a giant snake a couple of episodes in, but no, that's like a snake they have to protect, so that doesn't happen. But did it though? Maybe it did, but he just didn't kill it, at least. So it has a lot of those sort of things, and we in the last season there is like a cool kind of spoiler alert, but there is like a dinosaur world underground, and that kind of reminds me of Skull Island quite a lot. So definitely some stuff in there taken from Kong, but I like the sort of sci-fi nature of it. And they do have some themes in there about in the environment, and about artificial intelligence and stuff like that. So it's not overly deep, but the stuff they suggest in there is a lot more interesting than a lot of other similar shows aimed at a similar audience. So for what it is, I'd say it's worth a watch. And even if you're not in the intended age group like me, I still found it pretty enjoyable. So if you're a big Kong fan, I recommend this as pretty cool casual viewing. Nothing special like like Avatar, Last Airbender, or any of those sort of like kids shows, but definitely above its peers. And Kong is always cool. So that's about it for this little review of Kong, King of the Apes. So without further ado, may all your vinyl be irradiated vinyl. Over and out.